Today is Saturday, March 12th, and today we want to take the time to make sure you're hearing the human side of war with a first-hand account from a Ukrainian born and raised in Kharkiv, a city the BBC reports is now facing airstrikes and shelling every night. Roman Vydro worked as an engineer and business co-founder in Kharkiv before he felt forced to flee. Now he's holed up at an apartment-turned-safehouse in western Ukraine for who knows how long, determined to fight back any way he can. So he's sharing his experience during this war and about the horrors his friends are still seeing on the front lines. He also explains why he's never been prouder than he is now to be Ukrainian. Welcome to the Newsworthy Special Edition Saturday, when we sit down with a different expert or celebrity every Saturday to talk about something in the news. Don't forget to tune in every Monday through Friday for our regular episodes, where we provide all the day's news in 10 minutes. I'm Erica Mandy. It's now time for today's Special Edition Saturday. Roman, thank you so much for coming on the Newsworthy.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for covering all this mess.
This war has been a concept in your life for a long time. Is it surreal that it's actually happening now?
It was not a gigantic surprise for us to realize that the war has started because to some extent the war has been in our life for about 8 years since the situation started, getting quite serious in two eastern regions of the country, Donetsk and Luhansk regions. It was not, out of the blue for us, especially with all these last couple months when Russia was accumulating troops and weapons on the border. But actually, all of us never thought that they would pursue. We thought that all these troops on the border were just a part of this unprecedented informational warfare campaign. None of us thought that Russia would be just that stupid to go and pursue the traditional warfare.
Can you paint a picture for our listeners of the moment you first found out Russia invaded to where you are now? What has unfolded over that time?
It all started at 5 a.m. on the February 24th. My mom actually called me and told me that the war has started. At the same time, I started hearing some distant explosions about, the same level you would hear fireworks at the 4th of July in the States. But then quickly within the next hour, we discovered that it is happening all over the country. It's not just the conflict in these regions that were expected to have some military action. Every person has their own story on what he or she were up to within the first couple of hours of war. And my story is quite uncommon because I actually went to sleep and slept for maybe 3 or 4 hours because my girlfriend and I, we understood that we have to be highly productive today. We need to get some sleep for this to happen. So then we woke up and made sure that it was not just this horrible dream you have. We made some food out of everything that was in the fridge, packed some stuff, got our documents and cash, got into a car and drove to my office. I'm a co-founder of a project called Garage Hub. It used to be one of the first fabrication laboratories, like an open workshop in eastern Ukraine. It's basically like a co-working space. At the same time, we were occupying about a 200 square meter basement. We actually transformed into a bomb shelter for around 60 people with kids and pets. During that first day, it was quite a nightmare in terms of logistics because we were mostly driving around the city, gathering our loved ones, transferring them to safer places, exchanging cars, looking for gasoline.
So what made you ultimately decide to leave your hometown?
Our plan for whether we should stay or leave the city was that we wanted to stay in the city for as long as we could be useful. I don't know how to hold a gun, and neither I know how to shoot it, but I'm really good at building complex systems. I'm pretty good at crisis management and project management in general. And at 7 p.m. that first day, we've learned that Russian tanks were already closing in on our city. And we also learned that the curfew was being imposed at 10 p.m. that same day. And we just did not want to wake up in the city occupied by Russian military, because with our set of skills, we would definitely not be useful in a city occupied by Russian army. So that's when we made the really difficult decision of getting into cars and driving west. So we managed to evacuate 12 people, 1 dog, 2 cats, and a turtle. And that's how we set on a quite difficult and emotionally devastating 3-day journey all the way across the country to a western city where I'm currently located. It's within Ukraine. It's not far from a Romanian border. and it's relatively safe. We're quite lucky because we get to spend only around an hour a day in bomb shelters, whereas my friends and colleagues and loved ones who actually stayed in the city of Kharkiv have to spend up to half a day to an entire day in bomb shelters.
What are you hearing from people who maybe are still, as you said, in bomb shelters for most of the day? What are they experiencing?
Yeah, so this is a tough topic. For the first maybe 6 days, my parents were also in Kharkiv. They were in a private home with a pretty secure basement, but at some point electricity went out and it was eventually impossible for them to stay there, and they decided to go west as well. So yeah, it was really difficult being in touch with my parents and not knowing whether they're safe or not. I have a whole bunch of friends in Kharkiv who are still there. And I know that some of these people have seen death. One of my friends left a bomb shelter just for half an hour and was standing in line in a grocery store outside when an explosion happened. And the person just 10 feet away was wounded in the head. And this guy, he doesn't know whether this person survived or not. My friends, really good friends of mine, were volunteering in the city and distributing humanitarian aid in a car once an explosion happened right next to them, and all the windows went out in the car, and they had to provide some emergency aid to a random passerby who was injured in the leg. Some of my friends are refusing to share these stories because it's really hard for them to even go through that trauma. It's probably not even the worst, because the worst thing is when you're trying to reach out to someone and find out that these people are simply not there. We had a group of people helping out in Chernihiv, which is up north from Kiev. So when we were sending some help their way, and at some point we learned that they just died. They were killed. And same went for another volunteer in Kharkiv who was also not responding. We also had to track her down and find a specific morgue where she actually was at. So it's quite chilling to get that kind of info, but that's something that we need to learn to live with, because this war, it ain't pretty, and people are being killed every day.
Still ahead, Roman explains how he and others got creative to fight back, plus what role he thinks the Russian people have in all of this, and what he calls his most important message to everyone listening now and paying attention to this conflict. That's coming up. But first, let's take a quick break to thank our sponsors. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. Whether it's the news of the day making you feel overwhelmed or depressed, or the stress of your job, parenting, relationships, the loss of a loved one, or something else, we all deal with tough times in our lives. Or maybe everything's fine, but you just feel like something is missing. Well, I've experienced all of the above, and I found that therapy is a great way to deal with it and overcome it all. Look, you probably know that all relationships take work, and that includes the most important relationship you have in your life, and that is the one you have with yourself. So this month, BetterHelp Online Therapy wants to remind you that therapy is a great way to make sure you show up for yourself. BetterHelp is online therapy that is more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can be matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. It offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. Give it a try and see why over 2 million people have used BetterHelp Online Therapy. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and the Newsworthy listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/newsworthy. That's BetterHelp, betterhelp.com/newsworthy. This episode is also brought to you by Masterworks. It's a new year, which means it's time for new ideas. And turns out that women may be better investors than men. That's right. According to research, women investors outperform their male counterparts. So what gives some women investors an edge? They're more likely to be risk-conscious with their investments, according to this research. And one asset that can help diversify your portfolio and is not so correlated to traditional stocks and bonds is blue-chip contemporary art. And typically, it's only the bajillionaires like Beyonce and Bezos who can afford a chic Picasso for their walls. But Masterworks is changing all of that. Masterworks is the startup giving everyday investors a piece of the art pie, or palette to be metaphorical. They've made blue chip art investable, so you can own a fraction of a multi-million-dollar piece of art. That way, anyone can add paintings by artists like Monet, Basquiat, and Banksy to their portfolio without paying millions. And you can join them by going to Masterworks.Art/newsworthy. Again, that's Masterworks.Art/newsworthy. See important disclosures at Masterworks.io/disclaimer. Okay, now back to my conversation with Roman Vydro. So you touched on your desire to be useful. How did you figure out what to do next in order to help the war effort against Russia?
A lot of images and news were pouring in, and we were exposed to a huge amount of injustice. So I was really angry for day 3 and 4. And then while on the go, we were brainstorming a lot on how we could be useful. What could we do to actually get back at Russia? So I'm currently in this apartment with a whole bunch of people who have this unique set of skills ranging from creativity to crisis management, who are simultaneously angry and courageous. And we managed to sustainably run some projects that help us help others. So the first one is directly connected to media. We are fighting this monster raised on lies and propaganda. Every truthful interview we could conduct, every truthful article in Western media we could help with is a silver bullet. We developed this service. Basically, it's a confidential database of speakers. We have around 100 speakers at the moment in absolutely different situations all over the country. And so far, we managed to handle around 100 requests from media from all over the world. Another thing that we do is fundraising effort. This money is spent mostly on humanitarian aid. So another one is a project that my girlfriend is organizing, because before the war, she used to be this cultural manager in the city of Kharkiv. So she launched this project that is called An Art of Living. It's basically an effort to show of what artists are going through while they are spending time in bomb shelters. She's currently getting requests from all over the world to have digital expositions for these artists. And so this now is shaping up into this initiative to basically establish a fund to support Ukrainian artists to kind of export their valuable product, even during the war, to showcase Ukrainian culture.
And to your point, it sounds like so many people are trying to use whatever skills and connections that they have to contribute in some way. What goes through your mind when you're thinking about everyone trying to pull together to do that, including people you probably know picking up guns for the first time and fighting in the streets?
Right now, I don't know a single person on Facebook or anywhere from Ukraine who is not fighting this war. I feel like this is a proof that this war is probably the last fight of Vladimir Putin with reality. And it makes me incredibly proud. It makes me proud to be Ukrainian. It actually gives me more motivation to do all these projects every day and come up with new ones as well.
I assume I know your feelings about President Putin, but what are your feelings about the Russian people?
Russian people are simultaneously some particular family members who I used to, go on vacations with and celebrate some holidays with. But at the same time, in their mass, they are the people who have actually let this happen. Because, this informational autocracy that has launched this senseless war and started this aggression towards my country, it would not be functioning without this quiet consent of Russian people. Do I think that they have played an important role in this invasion? Yes. Do I think that there is something that can be done on their side to make it stop? Yes. Do I think that this is something that could be done easily? No. But at the same time, my country right now is paying a terrible price for this quiet consent that the Russian people have had over the last decades.
What are you preparing yourself for in terms of what could happen next? How long you might be where you are now?
Pretty much anything could happen tomorrow. And so we are trying to build plans only maybe 2 or 3 days ahead. I'm pretty confident that we will probably stay where we are for some period of time, definitely a couple weeks, maybe a couple months. My plan is to be as useful as possible, create helpful initiatives and impact as possible to fight back, because this modern war is not only being fought with missiles and guns and bullets, it's also being fought with creativity. This is the resource that we have a bunch. This is something that will fuel the new and innovative ways of civilian resistance that Russia has never seen and that Russia has never expected. And that is why we will win for sure.
Is there any final thought that you want to leave our listeners with?
It's just unbelievable how graphic, how real, how senseless this war is. I'm asking everyone who's listening, please do not get used to that war. People get used to bad things really fast. This conflict, this war, it's probably not going to be over tomorrow. And I know that eventually this initial spike of anxiety and this initial spike of this anger that you see once you are exposed to that injustice, it wears off. Please don't let that happen to yourself. Please pay a lot of attention to what's going on, because we are real people over here. We are just like you. For you, the concept of war is purely virtual right now. It's something that is happening on TV. And it just turns out that even in the 21st century, the war is not just something that used to be in the history textbook. The war is something that can happen to you on a random Thursday at 5 a.m.
All right, well, we want to thank Roman Vydro for sharing his experiences with us and for everything he's doing to help others in Ukraine. And since we did talk about some of the actions of people inside Russia, it's worth noting that the group Human Rights Watch reports protesters have staged rallies in dozens of cities across Russia, and thousands of those people have been arrested for it. We're, of course, continuing to bring you all the latest updates on this conflict in our regular 10-minute news roundups every Monday through Friday. But that'll do it for now. We'll be back on Monday. Until then, have a great weekend.